The man at the bank wore a grey suit that had been pressed too many times. He folded his hands on the desk and gave me the kind of smile people give when they've already decided you're going to fail. "Miss Caldwell," he said, 88 acres, a $43,000 note, a house that hasn't seen a new roof since 1994, and you're 20 years old. With respect, this isn't a beginner's situation. I sat there in my grandmother's barn coat. It still smelled like her, like cedar and lavender and something I couldn't name. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been sitting in a different office, in a different state, listening to a different man in a suit explain why a college could expel a girl for staying past curfew to keep her roommate from hurting herself. 2 offices, 2 men, same smile. What neither of them knew what I didn't know yet, sitting in that cracked leather chair on a Tuesday morning in February, was that my grandmother had left me something the bank couldn't see on any ledger. Something locked behind a greenhouse door I didn't have the key to, something she had spent 35 years protecting in silence. And the man at the bank, he already knew about it. He just didn't think I'd find out in time. The man at the bank wore a grey suit that had been pressed too many times. He folded his hands on the desk, gave me that smile. The smile. The one men in offices give 20-year-old girls who walked in alone. "Miss Caldwell." His voice was patient, too patient. 88 acres, a $43,000 note, a house that hasn't seen a new roof since 1994, and you're 20 years old. He paused, the kind of pause that makes the word "but" do all the work. With respect, this isn't a beginner's situation. I sat there, in my grandmother's barn coat, the brown Carhartt with the cracked left elbow. It still smelled like her. Cedar and lavender and something I couldn't name. Something I would never be able to name again because she was the only one who carried it and now she was gone. 3 months earlier, I had been put on academic leave in New Hampshire. 3 weeks earlier, I had been officially expelled for staying in my roommate's dorm room past midnight because she had been holding a bottle of pills and crying so hard she couldn't breathe. I'd talked her down. I'd called the resident advisor. I'd done everything you're supposed to do, except go back to my own room by curfew. So they expelled me. 2 officers, 2 men, same smile. "Mr. Vesper," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "I just need 30 days. He nodded, slowly, the way a doctor nods when he's about to tell you it's already too late. "I can give you 30 days, Miss Caldwell. The note is due March 8th, but I should mention." His eyes flicked up. "We do have an interested party, a buyer, someone who has expressed real enthusiasm about your grandmother's property. The terms would be favorable, very favorable." "What kind of buyer?" "A regional agricultural firm. Established. Reputable." "What's their name?" He smiled again, bigger this time. "That's confidential at this stage." I didn't answer, because I was thinking about the postcard. The postcard I'd found 3 nights ago in the worn leather wallet my grandmother's lawyer had handed me across his desk. My head hadn't been working right since the phone rang in the parking lot of the New Hampshire bus station. Since I'd heard the words your grandmother passed in October, "Dear, your mother didn't want to upset you during your hearing." The hearing. My mother had been hiding a funeral from a daughter who didn't have a college left to graduate from. That was my family. That was the kind of family that hid funerals. I stood up, slowly, held out my hand the way my grandmother used to. One firm press, then release. No lingering. 30 days, Mr. Vesper, I'll be back." He shook my hand. His was soft. "I'll be here, Miss Caldwell. Whatever you decide." The way he said "whatever you decide" didn't sound like a choice. It sounded like a countdown. I walked out of the bank into the kind of February cold that doesn't announce itself. No wind, no drama, just 19 degrees and a sky the color of old tin. The defroster on the truck cracked when I turned the key. I waited for the windshield to clear, watched my breath fog the glass, and I thought about the postcard. The truck was a 1998 Ford F-150 that had belonged to my grandmother. The interior smelled like hay and diesel. There was a coffee stain on the bench seat that was older than I was. A wooden bead rosary hung from the rearview mirror, not because she was religious, but because a neighbor had given it to her after her husband died, and she didn't throw away gifts. I pulled out of the bank parking lot, drove south, 40 minutes on Route 9 through Stonebrook Hollow, past the feed store, past the abandoned dairy barn, where someone had spray painted a peace sign in 1973 and nobody had ever painted over it. Down the gravel lane that turned to mud between November and April, to the farmhouse where my grandmother had died in October, in the kitchen, alone, on a Tuesday morning between breakfast and lunch. The lawyer had told me that part, very gently. The way you tell someone something they should have heard 4 months earlier. I pulled into the drive, turned off the engine, sat there for a long time before I went inside. The wallet was in my coat pocket. The leather was cracked at the corners. 40 years of being opened and closed and opened again. Inside, when the lawyer had handed it to me, were 3 things. Her driver's license expired. A faded photograph of a man I assumed was my grandfather, taken in the 1960s. And a postcard, hand-drawn, on the front, in colored pencil, a sketch of a cardinal sitting on a fence post. The kind of drawing you do when you have time. When you sit at the kitchen window for an hour and watch the bird and decide it deserves to be remembered. On the back in her handwriting dated 4 years ago, Little Wren. If you're reading this, it means I'm already gone. I am sorry for that. I wanted to tell you so many things in person, but the women in our family have always been better at writing than speaking, and I am no exception. 3 things. 1. Don't trust the man in the suit who comes to the door. He will come. Be polite. Be careful. Sign nothing. 2. The big greenhouse out back is locked. Open it before you do anything else, but only when you are ready. You will know. 3. I love you. I have always loved you. Even when I couldn't say it. Grandma Mira. I had read it 11 times in 3 days. I had not yet found the key. I had not yet been ready. The farmhouse was older than my mother. Built in 1923 by a man who farmed potatoes and apples and died in the Second World War before he could finish the porch. My grandmother had bought it in 1979, with my grandfather paid $60,000 for the 88 acres, which everyone in town said was too much. She had outlived my grandfather by 27 years. She had run the farm alone for most of them. I let myself in. The kitchen smelled like cold wood smoke and lavender. The Vermont casting stove was unlit. I knelt and built a fire the way she had taught me when I was 7. Newspaper twisted into knots. Kindling crossed in a teepee. 1 match. Patience. The flame caught on the 3rd breath. I stood up, walked to the kitchen window, looked out. The yard ran flat for about 100 feet, then sloped down toward the old chicken coop where 9 nameless hens were poking at the frozen ground. My grandmother had never named chickens. On principle, she always said, though I had never understood what the principle was. Past the coop, the orchard. Past the orchard, the 3 greenhouses. 2 of them were small, glass, the kind you'd see at a hardware store. The 3rd was bigger, wood-framed, older, set behind a row of cedar trees that blocked it from view of the road. And the door was wrapped in a heavy chain, a padlock the size of a fist. I had walked past it twice in 3 days and pretended not to see it. I made coffee. The kettle whistled. I poured it into the only mug I'd found that didn't have a chip in the rim, white with a faded green stripe near the base. The kind of mug that has been washed 10,000 times and still holds its shape. I sat at the kitchen table. There was a cookbook on the table. I hadn't moved it. It had been there when I arrived 3 days ago, open to no particular page, its blue cloth cover faded along the spine. Joy of Cooking 1973 edition. My grandmother's handwriting in the margins of nearly every page. Little notes, adjustments, substitutions. Use the brandy wines from the south bed, the Macintosh from the old tree by the well. Half the sugar, trust the apples. I had not yet read the notes carefully. I had been afraid of them, because reading them meant she was finished writing. I drank the coffee. The fire in the stove caught and crackled, and someone knocked on the door. I jumped. The mug slopped coffee onto the table. The knock came again. 3 soft raps. The kind of knock that wasn't trying to scare anyone. I went to the door. A man stood on the porch, mid-60s, tall, thin, wearing a wool cap pulled down over white hair. He held a paper bag. Wren, he said. He knew my name. Yes. I said, I'm Otis Brennan, your grandmother's neighbor, half a mile up the road. I knew the name. She had mentioned him in letters when I was a kid. Otis came over to help with the south fence. Otis brought eggs. Otis fixed the tractor again. I didn't say anything. I just stared at him. I brought bread. He held out the bag. It's still warm. Why? It came out wrong. Too sharp. I hadn't meant it like that. He didn't flinch. Because your grandmother is dead, he said. And you're alone in her house. And I should have come 3 days ago. I'm sorry I didn't. I took the bag. He nodded, turned to go. Wait, I said. He turned back. I didn't know what I was about to ask. I just knew I didn't want him to leave yet. Because for 3 days, I had been the only living person in this house, and the silence had started to feel like a hand at my throat. Did you... I started. Were you there when she... I couldn't finish. He understood. I was the one who found her Wren. His voice was soft. Tuesday morning, October 4th, she was at the kitchen table, cup of coffee in front of her. She had a peaceful face. I want you to know that. She had a peaceful face. I held the bread bag against my chest. I didn't cry. I had not cried yet. Not at the lawyer's office. Not when my mother called the next morning and tried to explain why she hadn't told me. Not in the truck. Not in the bank. Otis looked at me carefully. Come over for supper this week, Wren. Any night. My wife's been gone 6 years. I cook for 2 anyway, out of habit. He turned and walked down the steps. He stopped at the bottom of the porch, turned back. She talked about you, Ren, all the time. She was proud of you. I want you to know that too. He walked to his truck. I closed the door. I stood in the kitchen with the warm bread in my arms, and I didn't know what to do with my body. So I sat down. So I opened the cookbook. I turned to a random page. Page 67, pumpkin bread. She had crossed out the recipe's measurements and written her own in pencil. Use long pie. 3 cups. Reduce sugar by half. The long pie has more body than store pumpkin. You won't believe me until you taste it. Between the pages, a slip of paper. Folded once. I didn't pick it up at first. I just stared at it. Because I knew her handwriting from across a room. I knew the slip of paper was for me. I opened it. Ren, if you've gotten this far, you found the cookbook. Good. The long pie pumpkin in this recipe. I've kept the seed since 1992. A family up in Maine had grown it for 5 generations before they gave it to me. They were the last people who had it. When the woman in the long coat comes to the door, and she will come soon, she will offer you a great deal of money. The number will be designed to make you say yes. Don't say yes. If you sell to her company, they will cross her long pie with their patented hybrid. They will register the new variety. Within 2 years, the original long pie will be functionally extinct. It will not be a pumpkin anymore. It will be 150 years of one family. Gone. I am not asking you to be a farmer, Ren. I am asking you to be a keeper. Mira. I sat at the table. I read it twice, 3 times, and then, for the first time since the lawyer's office, for the first time since the phone rang in the parking lot, for the first time since I had unpacked my single suitcase in a bedroom that still smelled like her perfume. I cried. Not pretty crying, not movie crying, ugly crying, shoulder shaking, snot running, face in my hands crying. For the grandmother I hadn't seen in 3 years because my mother had decided we shouldn't visit. For the funeral I had missed. For the 4 years of postcards she had written and never sent because she didn't know if I would understand. For the fact that I had been 20 years old and stupid and busy with a college that had thrown me out and I had not known she was dying. For the fact that she had known I would come anyway. That she had left me a cookbook and a postcard and a locked greenhouse. That she had believed in me when she shouldn't have, when nobody else did, when I was a girl who couldn't even follow a curfew without getting expelled. She had believed in me. I cried for a long time. The fire burned down. When I lifted my head, the kitchen was darker. The sun was setting behind the cedar trees that hid the 3rd greenhouse from the road. I wiped my face on my sleeve. I stood up. I walked to the laundry room. Because I had a theory. My grandmother was a woman who labeled things, who organized by logic, who would not lose a key. She would put a key somewhere that made sense within her own system, and the system I was starting to understand was built around the idea that I would eventually arrive and look in the right place. The laundry room, pine paneling, a wooden coat board with hooks. Most of the hooks empty. One held a canvas hat I had not moved because it still smelled faintly like her. Below the hooks, a small wooden box, nailed to the wall, about 4 inches deep, hinged at the top with a brass latch. I had noticed it on my first day. I had opened it and seen nothing and moved on. Because I had been moving fast, taking inventory, looking for large things, missing the small ones. I lifted the lid. I looked harder this time. The box was lined with black felt. The felt was loose at the bottom corner. I lifted the felt. Underneath, taped to the wood with a single strip of electrical tape, was a small brass key. The tape was going brittle at the edges. The label in my grandmother's careful cursive was a single word: Mira. I held the key in my palm. It was warm from being in the box for years. Or maybe it just felt warm. I don't know. I'm not a person who believes in signs. Except, I am the granddaughter of a woman who left signs. I put on her barn coat. I picked up the flashlight from the hook by the door. I walked outside. The yard was already in shadow. The temperature had dropped. My breath came out white. Somewhere in the coop, a hen made a soft, questioning sound. I crossed the yard, past the orchard, past the row of cedar trees, to the third greenhouse. The chain was heavy. The padlock was rusted, but the keyhole had been protected with a small rubber cap. I pulled off the cap, slid the key in. It didn't turn the first time. I held the lock steady with my left hand and applied slight upward pressure. It turned on the second try. A single soft click. The kind of sound a thing makes when it has been waiting. I pulled the chain free. It rattled against the wood. I unwound it from the door handles. Set it on the ground in a coiled pile. I opened the door. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Not what I expected. Not rot, not damp. Earth and cedar and something faintly green even in February. The smell of a place that had been tended. The smell of a place that was still alive. I clicked on the flashlight. The beam swept across the room. And I stopped. Because what I had walked into was not a greenhouse in any way I understood greenhouses. There were no rows of tomato plants. No hanging baskets. No regular crops. There were 60 raised beds. Each one maybe 3 feet by 4 feet. Each one labeled with a small aluminum tag wired to a wooden stake. I walked to the nearest bed. The tag read Brandywine, 1889, Pennsylvania. Open pollinated heirloom tomato. Acquired 1987. The next bed, mortgage lifter. 1922, West Virginia, pink beefsteak. Acquired 1991. The next, Hopi pale gray. 1934, sweet winter squash. Acquired through correspondence, 1994. The next, Newtown pippin, pre-1759. Cuttings acquired through a New England heirloom orchard network, 1991. I kept walking. I lost count. There were varieties I had never heard of. Beans named after towns I'd never been to. Squash named after women I'd never met. Apples that had been growing in this country before this country had a name. In the center of the greenhouse was a wooden workbench. On the bench was a leather-bound notebook. I crossed to it slowly, like a person approaching an altar. I lifted it. The leather was worn smooth in the places where her hands had held it. The corners were soft with age. The spine had been repaired at least once with thick brown thread. I opened the cover, the first page. In her handwriting, The Keeping Garden, Mira Caldwell. Begun in the spring of 1986. For whoever comes next. I sat down on the bench. I held the notebook against my chest. For 35 years. 35 years she had done this. Quietly. In a locked greenhouse behind a row of cedar trees on a farm everyone in town had assumed was just a small family operation run by a woman who kept to herself. A keeping garden. I didn't know yet what that meant. Not really. Not the full weight of it. but I knew it meant something the bank hadn't seen on its ledger. Something Roland Vesper in his grey suit had no way to value. I closed the notebook. I tucked it under my coat. I walked back to the house. I rebuilt the fire in the stove. I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of me, and I read until 2 in the morning. Page after page. Acquisitions, trades, letters from women in Pennsylvania and Maine and North Carolina and Oregon. A whole network. A whole quiet countrywide network of people my grandmother had called keepers. She had been part of something. She had been part of something for 35 years, and no one in our family had known. The next morning, the man came. Not Otis, a different man. The kind of car I noticed before. I noticed the driver a black SUV with rental plates, the kind of vehicle that doesn't belong on a gravel road in February. He parked in the drive. He did not get out right away. He sat in the car for almost a full minute, like he was checking his phone, or his hair, or his lines. Then he opened the door, stepped out. He was in his 50s. Heavy wool overcoat, charcoal grey, polished black boots that had never seen mud, briefcase. He walked up to the porch with the kind of stride that says, I have done this many times. He knocked. I opened the door. Miss Caldwell? Yes. My name is Jeffrey Hollis. I represent Thorne and Hollis Heritage Selects. May I come in? No. The word came out before I decided to say it. He blinked, smiled. I understand. May we speak on the porch? Why are you here? Miss Caldwell, your grandmother had a relationship with our firm for several years. We provided certain products of hers to a small number of high-end retailers. With her passing, my employer would like to extend our most sincere condolences and to offer you a path forward. What path? May I sit? No. He laughed. A small one, surprised but adjusting. All right, standing it is. He set his briefcase on the porch railing, opened it, pulled out a leather folder, did not, I noticed, hand it to me, held it close to his chest. My employer would like to make a personal offer for the property, for the 88 acres, for the residence, and for the contents of the third greenhouse. The contents of the third greenhouse. He said it like it was nothing. Like he was describing furniture. $295,000, he said. Cash, closing within 45 days. We would assume the agricultural lien. You would walk away debt-free with a not insignificant sum in your pocket. He smiled. The smile of a man who has just said something generous. I stood in the doorway in my grandmother's barn coat. I felt the notebook in the inner pocket, pressed against my ribs. You said your employer, I said. Who is your employer? Adelaide Thorne, the principal of Thorne and Hollis. And what does Thorne and Hollis do with the seeds exactly, after they buy them? He smiled wider. We propagate them, Miss Caldwell. We make them available to a discerning consumer market. We are in our way doing what your grandmother did. Just at scale. At scale. Yes. And what happens to the original varieties after you propagate them at scale? A pause. A small one. A pause that told me he had not expected the question, or had expected it later, from someone older. The original varieties are preserved, Miss Caldwell. And patented? The smile faltered. By a hair. Some of our crosses, certainly. The hybrids that result from our breeding program are intellectual property, as is standard in the industry. industry. Miss Caldwell. He recalibrated. The smile came back. Bigger. You are 20 years old. You have a debt obligation due in less than 30 days. You have a property in significant disrepair. I am offering you nearly $300,000 today. Thank you for the offer. You'll consider it. I won't. Miss Caldwell? Mr. Hollis, I'd like you to leave my porch now. He looked at me for a long moment. Not unkindly. The way a man looks at a child who has not yet understood that the adults are going to win this conversation in the end. He picked up his briefcase, walked down the porch steps, got into his SUV, backed out of the drive without waving. I closed the door. I leaned against it. My heart was beating in my throat. $300,000. $300,000 would solve every problem I had, would pay off the bank, would let me start over somewhere, a new school, a new state, an apartment with a working heater, would let me sleep at night without lying awake doing math. $300,000 was a lot of money for a 20-year-old, especially a 20-year-old whose family had hidden a funeral from her. I went to the table. I opened the cookbook. I read the note about long pie again. It will not be a pumpkin anymore. It will be 150 years of one family. Gone. I read it 5 times. Then I went to the kitchen drawer where my grandmother had kept her stationery, pulled out a pad, a blue ballpoint pen. I wrote at the top of the page what I know, what I need to know, 2 columns. Under what I know, I wrote $43,000 due by March 8th. Adelaide Thorne wants the seeds, not the land. Grandma knew she would come. Grandma knew I would say no. Under what I need to know, I wrote why Mom won't talk about Grandma, who Roland Vesper really works for. I underlined the last one. I made a decision. I was not going to sell. I had 30 days. I had a notebook. I had a neighbor who had brought me warm bread. I had a grandmother who had spent 35 years of her life believing that someone eventually would come. That someone was me. I closed the notebook. I put on her barn coat. I went outside to feed the chickens. The barred rock, who always stood apart from the others, was at the feeder, eating slowly. She glanced at me. I looked back at her. You don't have a name yet, I said. She blinked. That's all right, I said. Neither do I. The first tin came up easy. The second one didn't. I'd found the map the night before, folded behind a loose fabric lining inside the back cover of the leather notebook. Hand-drawn. 88 acres in pencil. 14 red dots. At the bottom, in her writing, 14 tins. Backup seeds. Sealed with wax. Dated. Open them in order. Number 1 first, number 14 last. Number 14 is for the day you really need it. I worked at the edge of the backfield where the map said number 2, 12 feet north of the fence corner. The ground there had been pasture once, compacted, then frozen, then thawed, then frozen again. My shovel skidded off the surface twice before it bit in. The cold went through my gloves. The cold went through my coat. The cold went through the soles of my boots and up into my knees. I dug because she had buried it deep. Because in 1996, when she had buried tin number 2, she had probably stood at this exact corner and thought I should put this one deep because the field gets disked. I worked until my arms shook. I hit the tin at 26 inches. Mortgage lifter, pink beefsteak, 1991. I sat down in the snow with the tin in my lap, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I was 20 years old and freezing and pulling tins of seeds out of the frozen ground in February in Vermont. And somewhere in the world, a girl my age was sitting in a heated lecture hall taking notes on Russian literature. I laughed. And then I stood up, and I kept going. By dark, I had 3 tins. By the end of the week, I had 7. Otis came over the next Saturday morning. He brought coffee in a thermos. Black. The kind of coffee a man brings when he doesn't want to ask whether you take cream. I was in the kitchen with the map spread on the table. The 7 tins lined up along the counter. The leather notebook open beside them. He stood in the doorway. Did not come in until I waved him in. Ren. Otis. You been digging? I've been digging. He looked at the tins. He looked at me. He set the thermos on the table. How many to go? He said. 7? In this weather? In this weather. He nodded. He didn't smile. He didn't say, let me help you. He just said, I'll bring my mattock tomorrow. The pasture corners. You'll break a wrist with that shovel. He looked at me carefully. If you want. I looked at him for a long time, because I had questions. Otis? Ren. How long did you know her? A pause. A long time, Ren. How long? 31 years. What did you do with her? He looked down at the tins on the counter. He looked back at me. He said very quietly, I kept things too. I didn't say anything. He poured 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one. Drink that, he said. And then we'll work. And on the way home, I'll tell you a little of it. Not all. She didn't want all of it told yet. Why? Because she wanted you to find it, in order. In whose order? Hers. I drank the coffee. I put on her barn coat. We went outside. We worked together. Otis was 66 years old, and he could swing a mattock like a man half his age. He cracked the frozen pasture corners I couldn't have cracked. He pointed out the way she had laid out the map in a spiral starting near the house and working outward. She wanted you close to home first, he said, and then further, as you got stronger. By Sunday afternoon, I had 9 tins. By Tuesday, I had 11. Tin number 11 was not a coffee can. It was a small wooden box. I uncovered it at the base of an old fence post along the southern boundary where the map said 11. Stone wall south. 5th post from the corner. I counted the posts. I found the right one. The wood box came out of the ground wet, heavier than I expected. I did not open it in the field. I carried it back to the kitchen and set it on the table and looked at it for a long minute before I lifted the lid. Inside 3 things: a bundle of letters tied with kitchen twine, a photograph, and a folded sheet of paper on top with my name on it. Ren. If you dug this one up, you are halfway through. I am proud of you. I am also proud of myself for guessing right about you. The letters in this box are from a woman named Pearl Hatchett. She lived in Pennsylvania. She is now in her late 80s. She is the woman who gave me the Quaker beans. She wrote to me for 30 years. The photograph is of her, with me, at a heritage seed gathering in 1997. The one place I ever went where I felt entirely seen. She is still alive. Ren. Her address is in the back of the leather notebook. If you ever wonder whether what I built was real right to her, she will know who you are. Mira. I sat at the table. I held the photograph. It was a Polaroid, faded at the edges of two women in their 50s, standing in front of a wooden barn under a striped awning. My grandmother on the right, a small woman in a blue cardigan on the left, with her hand on my grandmother's shoulder. They were both laughing. I had never seen my grandmother laugh like that, in any photograph, in my whole life. I sat at the table and looked at the picture, and I thought about how many years a woman could keep something to herself before it stopped being a secret and started being a country she lived in alone. I put the photograph in the leather notebook. I would write to Pearl Hatchet, but not yet. Not until I knew what I was writing to tell her. 3 days later, the phone rang. The phone in the kitchen was a yellow rotary. It had been mounted to the wall above the spice rack since 1981. It still worked. The cord was tangled into a permanent corkscrew from 40 years of being stretched too far. I picked it up. Hello. Ren? My mother's voice. I closed my eyes. Mom. Ren, sweetheart. How are you doing up there? I'm fine. I've been worried. Have you? A pause. A long one. Ren? Honey? Please don't be like this. Like what? Like this. Cold? Mom? I had reasons. What were they? A breath. A sharp one on her end. Ren, I don't think a phone call is the best way to. What were the reasons, Mom? You were waiting on the hearing. I lost the hearing. I was expelled 3 weeks ago. I didn't know that yet when the funeral happened. You knew when the lawyer's letter went out? Ren. You hid a funeral from me, Mom. You hid a funeral from me. She started crying. I had heard my mother cry exactly 3 times in my life. Once when my grandfather died. Once when she lost a job in 2011. And once in 2016 in the kitchen of our apartment in Manchester when she came home from a phone call I had not been allowed to overhear. This was the 4th. I'm sorry, she said. Her voice cracked. Ren, I'm so sorry. I held the phone. I did not say it's okay, because it wasn't. Mom, why didn't you and Grandma talk? A long silence. It's complicated. It's not, Mom. Tell me. Another silence. Ren? Mom? I made a mistake. What mistake? Mom? I tried to sell the farm. The kitchen went quiet, the kind of quiet where the refrigerator hum suddenly sounds enormous. When? In 2016, when she was in the hospital with pneumonia. You tried to sell her farm. She was in a coma for 2 days, Ren. She was 70 years old. The bills were going to be enormous. I thought I was being practical. You thought you were being practical? Ren? You met with a real estate company while she was unconscious. Yes. You signed something. A preliminary agreement, nothing final, while she was unconscious. Ren, please. And then she woke up. She woke up. And she cancelled the agreement. She cancelled the agreement. We lost the deposit. $18,000. I gave her every dollar in my savings to cover it. And then she never spoke to you again. She never spoke to me again. I held the phone. My hand was shaking. I was angry in 2 directions at once. Angry at my mother for what she had done. And angry at my grandmother for cutting off her own daughter for 6 years over a mistake made in fear. And I was angry at myself because I was the only one of the 3 of us who hadn't done anything wrong, and somehow I was the one standing in this kitchen with the consequences in my hands. Mom. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? A pause. Because I was ashamed. I closed my eyes. Mum, I have to go. Ren. I have to go. I'll call you back. When? I don't know. Ren. Soon, Mum. Soon. I promise. I hung up the phone. I stood in the kitchen for a long time with my hand still on the receiver. Then I went outside. I walked down to the chicken coop. I sat on the upturned 5-gallon bucket my grandmother had used as a stool for 40 years. The barred rock with no name came over to me and stood at my feet. Just stood there. I sat with the hen until the sun went down. The next morning. The phone rang again. It wasn't my mother. Miss Caldwell? Roland Vesper? Stonebrook Agricultural. Mr. Vesper? Miss Caldwell. I wanted to let you know about a small administrative matter. We were reviewing your grandmother's loan documents this morning, and we noticed an acceleration clause that triggers based on a change of title. A what? An acceleration clause. It moves up the due date in certain circumstances. We're required to honor the original terms. But what does that mean? It means, Miss Caldwell, that your note is technically due 18 days earlier than I had previously indicated. I apologize for the oversight. 18 days. 18 days. Mr. Vesper. Yes. You told me 30 days, last Tuesday, in your office. I was working from an incorrect file at the time. I do apologize. Why did you tell me 30 days if it's 12? As I said, an administrative oversight. I take full responsibility. Mr. Vesper. Yes. Are you? Is the bank getting paid to do this? A pause. A long one. I beg your pardon, Miss Caldwell. Are you on retainer? Miss Caldwell, I don't think I appreciate. Goodbye, Mr. Vesper. Miss? I hung up. I stood in the kitchen. My heart was a hammer in my chest. I had just accused a man at a regional bank of being on someone's payroll, on a yellow rotary phone, in a farmhouse where I owed $43,000 in 12 days. I went to the table. I sat down. I opened the leather notebook. I turned to a page I had marked the night before. A page from October 2019. Roland Vesper from the bank stopped by today, supposedly to discuss the lien refinancing options. He brought a representative from a regional grocer, asked if I would be willing to license a small number of varieties for limited commercial production. They said the bank could offer favorable refinancing terms in exchange. I said no. Roland was disappointed, not surprised. He has tried this before. The grocer's representative was a woman named Adelaide. She watched me carefully. I do not like the way she watches. I read the entry 3 times. I closed the notebook. I needed something else. I needed proof. I picked up the cookbook. I flipped through it. Slowly, page by page. Because there had to be more. Because the woman who had buried 14 tins in a spiral around her property had not stopped at one note. Page 67. Past page 80. I got to page 102. The page was a recipe for sourdough. There was no note tucked in it. But there was something else. The bottom margin of page 102. It looked blank. But I held it up to the kitchen window, up to the daylight, the faintest impressions of letters, like someone had written on the page in something that wasn't ink. I went to the cabinet under the sink. I found the box of birthday candles I had seen on my first day. White candles, thin, the kind you put on a child's cake. I lit one with the kitchen matches. I held the page over the flame, carefully, from a distance. The heat moved across the paper, slowly, and words began to appear. Brown letters bleeding up out of the white. Lemon juice? Ren. If you have brought a flame to this page, then you have begun to understand that something is wrong. The man at the bank, Roland Vesper, has been working both sides for at least 5 years. I do not have proof. I have a feeling. I have a feeling, and I have a memory of him bringing Adelaide Thorne to my kitchen on a Tuesday in October 2019 under the pretext of a refinancing meeting with no warning. A man like Roland Vesper does not bring a stranger to a client's kitchen unless he has been paid to introduce them. If he tries to accelerate your loan, that will be your proof. Be careful, be kind, be smart, sign nothing. Mira. I put the candle down. I sat at the table with my hands flat on the wood, and I tried to slow my breathing. She had known what was coming. 5 years out. I stood up. I went to the truck. I drove into town. The Vermont Country Sampler office was a converted storefront on the main street of Brattleboro, 2 doors down from a bakery that had been there since 1968. The windows had hand-painted lettering. The door had a brass bell over it that jingled when I pushed it open. A woman in her 60s looked up from a desk in the back. She had short grey hair, reading glasses on a beaded chain, a wool cardigan the color of cranberries. "Can I help you, honey?" "Are you Doris Tremaine?" "I am. I'm Ren Caldwell." She took off her reading glasses, slowly. She looked at me for a long moment. "You're Mira's granddaughter." "Yes." "I heard she passed. In October." "I'm sorry, dear." "Thank you." She studied me. "What brings you here, Ren?" "I have a story." "What kind of story?" "The kind you've been waiting for." She didn't answer. She just stood up. She walked over to a small couch in the corner of the office, pushed a stack of newspapers off the seat. "Sit," she said. I sat. She sat across from me, folded her hands on her lap, looked at me with the patience of a woman who had been a reporter for a long time and knew the difference between a story that was a story and a story that was just somebody's grief. "Tell me," she said. I told her. I told her about the bank, about Jeffrey Hollis, about the postcard in the wallet, about the locked greenhouse, about the cookbook with the lemon juice, about the 18-day acceleration clause that had appeared 3 days after I'd said no to a buyer, about the leather notebook, about the 11 tins, about Otis Brennan saying I kept things too. I told her about Pearl Hatchet in Pennsylvania. Doris Tremaine sat very still while I talked. When I was done, she said, "I interviewed her once." "What?" "I interviewed your grandmother years ago, after she refused a small conservation honor at the state level. I wrote a profile. She told me off the record that she didn't want to be in the article at all. I wrote it without using her name. The piece referred to a woman in southern Vermont. You wrote about her. I wrote about her, once, carefully, because she asked me to." She looked at me. Her eyes were sharp. "Ren, honey, do you know what you're sitting on?" "I'm starting to." "You're sitting on one of the most significant private heirloom collections in the Northeast. I want you to understand that. I want you to say it back to me so I know you understand it." I said it back to her. She nodded. "All right," she said. "Let me come out to the farm tomorrow." "What will you do?" "I will look at what you have. With my own eyes. I will not write a single word without your permission. And then, if you want me to, I will write a story that protects you, not one that exposes you. The difference matters. What's the difference? It's the difference between a story that says, come and see, and a story that says, come and help. Help. You don't need attention, Ren. You need allies. The next morning, Doris came. She walked through the greenhouse without speaking for almost an hour. She read 4 pages of the leather notebook standing up. She lifted 3 of the wax-sealed tins, turned them, read the labels. She looked at the map. She looked at the cookbook. When she was done, she set everything carefully back where she had found it. She walked out of the greenhouse. She stood in the orchard with her back to me for almost a minute. When she turned around, her eyes were wet. I'll write it this week, she said. All right? And Ren. Yes. I'm going to make some phone calls before the piece runs. I know some people. What people? Keepers, Ren. I know some other keepers. She drove back to town that night. I dug up tin number 12. It was at the base of the old apple tree, with the split trunk, the one I had climbed when I was 6. Hazel yellow sweet pepper seeds. Acquired 1989. Last known cultivator. I put the tin in the kitchen with the others. 12 coffee cans and 1 wooden box. 2 more. But the next thing that happened wasn't a tin. The next thing was a sound. 3 in the morning. I had been asleep. Pepper the black cat was on the foot of the bed. He went rigid. He sat straight up. He made a sound I had never heard a cat make. Low. A growl that was almost a hum. I opened my eyes. I lay very still. I heard it then. A faint metal sound from outside. The sound of something being worked at. A lock. The greenhouse? I sat up. Pepper jumped off the bed and ran to the window. I got up. Quietly, in my socks. I went to the window of my grandmother's old bedroom. I saw a flashlight. A small one. Focused. Bobbing near the door of the greenhouse. Someone was crouched at the chain. I could not see the face. I went to the kitchen, in my socks. I picked up the rotary phone. I dialed Otis Brennan's number from the list on the fridge. It rang once, twice. Hello. Otis, someone's at the greenhouse. A beat. Don't go outside, Ren. I won't. 5 minutes. He hung up. I stood in the kitchen in the dark. The flashlight outside kept bobbing. The chain rattled. The padlock clinked. 4 minutes. I heard Otis's truck on the gravel lane. The flashlight outside winked out. The shape ran. Down the back of the property. Toward the woods. Otis came in. He had a shotgun. He didn't say anything about the shotgun. He just leaned it against the wall by the door. You okay? I'm okay. He gone. He's gone. Did he get in? I don't know. We went out together. The chain was on the ground. The padlock had been cut clean with bolt cutters. The greenhouse door was closed, but unlatched. We looked at each other. We went in. I went to the Cherokee purple bed. I lifted the straw. I knelt. There. A single boot print. Faint. The soil had been just slightly disturbed. He had not stolen anything. He had not damaged anything. He had stepped into the Cherokee purple bed for 1 second, like he was marking it, like he was saying I was here. I looked at Otis. He looked at the boot print. He looked at me. Ren? Yes. I think it's time. For what? For me to tell you the parts she didn't want told yet. We went back to the kitchen. Otis poured coffee. He sat across from me at the table. He held the cup in both hands. He looked at me with the kind of look a man gives when he is about to break a promise to a dead friend because the living friend needs it more. Ren, I am not just your grandmother's neighbor. I know. I keep a backup collection. I know. He paused. He had expected me to be surprised. How do you know? I read the notebook. All of it. Most of it, then you know. I know there are at least 4 other keepers in this state. There are more than that. How many? In New England, about 20. Across the country, more. We are a small network. We do not have meetings. We do not have a website. We trade by mail, by phone, by word of mouth. Mira was one of the original ones, from the early 1980s. She was a founder Ren, not a member, a founder. I sat very still. She knew Adelaide Thorne was coming for her collection. She knew. For how long? Since 2019. Since the day Roland Vesper brought Adelaide to her kitchen. Mira called me that night. She had a feeling, she said. A bad one. She was 75 years old, and Adelaide Thorne was in her 40s, and the bank had brought them together. She started planning the next morning. The 14 tins, the lemon juice notes, the map, all of it. She built it for you. Why me? You know why. No, I don't, Otis. Why me? I was a girl who screwed up. I got expelled from school. I had nothing to offer her. Why me? He looked at me. For a long time. Because you cried over a sparrow once, when you were 8 years old. She told me about it. She said that one. That girl. She is the one. She had been waiting for you for 12 years. I sat back in the chair. I let the air out of my lungs. I looked at Otis. Otis. Ren. I think I need to make a call. Who? Doris Tremaine? At 3 in the morning. At 3 in the morning. He nodded. I picked up the phone. The line rang 4 times before she answered. Her voice was sleep rough. This is Doris? Doris, it's Ren. Ren, what happened? Someone broke the lock on the greenhouse tonight. He didn't take anything. He stepped into one of the beds, left a footprint. A long silence. Get me a photograph of the boot print, with a ruler in the frame for scale, and don't disturb the soil. I'm coming out at first light, and Ren. Yes. I'm calling the piece in tomorrow afternoon. It'll run in the Sunday edition. I'm not asking you anymore. I'm telling you. Okay. Honey. Yes. They're afraid of you. They wouldn't be doing this if they weren't. I hung up. I sat at the table with Otis. The wood stove popped. He looked at me. Ren. Yes. You're going to be all right. I don't know if I am. You are. Because you've already won the part that matters. What part? The part where you decided what you were. The story ran on Sunday. A long piece. A careful piece. A piece that did not name the bank or the buyer. A piece that did name my grandmother. A piece that called her one of the last great independent seed keepers in the American Northeast. A piece that ended with a sentence I read 3 times in the kitchen on a Sunday morning while the coffee got cold. She is gone now. But what she built is not lost. It has been entrusted to her granddaughter, who is 20 years old, and who has, over the past several weeks, demonstrated a steadiness of purpose that those of us who knew her grandmother would recognize. The phone started ringing at 9 in the morning and did not stop until almost 6 in the evening. a heritage seed organization in Iowa, a small farm in Maine, a woman from Pennsylvania, a man from Oregon. 4 keepers I had never heard of calling to introduce themselves. A foundation in Minnesota with a director named Marlene Whitfield who said very calmly on the phone, "Ren, we have been hoping to meet you. May we come to Vermont next week? We would like to help." I sat in the kitchen with the phone against my ear. The wood stove was crackling. Pepper was sleeping in the rocking chair. The leather notebook was open on the table. Page 1. The Keeping Garden, Mira Caldwell. Begun in the spring of 1986. For whoever comes next. I had 12 days left until the bank, but I had 13 tins on the counter. And I had a woman in Minnesota coming. And I had a boot print photograph in my pocket. And I had a mother in Manchester, New Hampshire, who I had not called back yet. I picked up the phone. I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Ren? Mom? Ren, sweetheart." I closed my eyes. I let the air out. "Mom, I think you should come up here." Silence. Then very softly, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "Ren, honey, I don't know if she would have wanted." "Mom, she's gone. She doesn't get a vote anymore. You and I get the votes. And I'm voting that you come up here." A long breath on the other end. All right. When?" "This weekend." "This weekend? There's something I want you to see." "What?" "The greenhouse, Mom." "Ren, you've never been in it." "No." "I know. How do you know?" "Because she would have told me if you had been." A pause. She said, "That's fair." "This weekend, Mom." "This weekend." I hung up the phone. I stood in the kitchen. I put on my grandmother's barn coat. I went outside. The barred rock with no name was at the chicken coop door. She looked at me. She blinked. I crouched down. "Hazel," I said. I had not planned to say it, but that was her name. I had finally named a chicken. Marlene Whitfield arrived 2 days later. She drove herself, a green Subaru with Minnesota plates and a dent in the rear bumper. She got out of the car in a wool coat, the color of oatmeal, and brown leather boots that had been resoled at least once. She was 68 years old, silver hair in a long braid. She looked at the farmhouse the way a person looks at a place they have been picturing. She walked up to the porch. She said, "You're Ren." "I'm Ren." "I'm Marlene." "I know." She held out her hand. I took it. Her grip was steady. "Show me the greenhouse," she said. I did. She walked the rows of raised beds. Slowly. She did not touch anything. She read each tag. She moved her lips as she read. Once or twice she made a small sound, the sound a person makes when they recognize a friend in a crowd. At the Newtown Pippin label, she stopped. She stood there for a long time. When she turned around, her eyes were full. "Ren." "Yes." "I want to make you an offer." "All right. We at our foundation will pay you $55,000. I sat down on the edge of the workbench. She kept talking, calmly. "For the right, not for ownership, for the right, to propagate a backup set of your collection at our partner facility in Iowa. The originals stay here, with you, on this farm, in this greenhouse, forever. You retain every right of ownership, every right of disposition, every right of refusal." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. "Ren?" "Yes. 55,000. Wire transfer by Friday. If you say yes." The bank wanted 43. I sat on the workbench. I looked at her. She waited. Why, I said. Why what? Why 55? The bank only wants 43. She smiled, a small one. Because, Ren, we have spent a long time watching your grandmother turn down worse offers from worse people. And we always told her, if you ever need us, we are here. She always said she didn't need us. She said she had a granddaughter. I closed my eyes. I did not cry, because there was work to do and a phone to dial and a contract to read. I have to think, I said. Take the day. I will. Ren. Yes. There's no catch. There's no fine print. I want you to read it 3 times before you sign it. I want you to call a lawyer. I want you to sit with it overnight. We are not Adelaide Thorne. We are not in a hurry. She walked back to her Subaru. She drove away. I called Doris. I called Otis. I called the lawyer in Brattleboro, whose name had been at the bottom of the original estate letter. He said he could look at the contract Thursday. I said I have to sign it by Friday. He said I'll move some things. Bring it in tomorrow at 9. He read the contract. He looked up from page 7. He said, "This is one of the cleanest contracts I have ever seen." He said, "Sign it." I signed it Thursday afternoon. The wire hit my account Friday morning at 10:47 a.m. I drove to the bank. Roland Vesper was at his desk. He saw me come in. His face did a small thing, a flicker, like he had been hoping I wouldn't come at all. I sat down across from him. I slid a cashier's check across the desk. $43,000, plus the 18 days of interest he had tried to accelerate me into. Down to the penny. He picked up the check. He looked at it. He looked at me. "Miss Caldwell." "Mr. Vesper?" "I'd like a receipt, please." "Of course." He typed. He printed. He handed me the receipt. I stood up. I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out an envelope. I set it on his desk. He looked at the envelope. "Miss Caldwell, what is?" "Open it." He didn't. He just looked at me. "Mr. Vesper." "Yes." "Open the envelope." He opened it. Inside was a photograph of Roland Vesper and a woman in a long coat in the parking lot of his bank getting into the same black SUV at the same time. I had taken it with my phone from across the street, sitting in my grandmother's truck. Roland looked at the photograph. He looked at me. He did not speak. "Mr. Vesper?" "Miss Caldwell." "I am not deciding what to do with this photograph today." I will let you know when I have decided." He swallowed. "Have a good morning, Mr. Vesper." I walked out. The brass bell on the bank door jingled behind me. I sat in the truck in the parking lot for a minute. My hands were shaking, but my chest was open. That Saturday, my mother arrived at noon. She drove a silver Toyota that I remembered from my whole childhood. The same car she had picked me up in from middle school in. The same car she had dropped me off at college in. The same car she had not driven to my grandmother's funeral in. I stood on the porch as she pulled in. She got out. She did not run to me. She did not throw her arms around me. She just stood by the car. Her hair had grayed at the temples since I'd seen her in August. She was wearing a coat I did not recognize. She looked tired. I walked down the porch steps. I stopped in the gravel. We stood there, about 6 feet apart. She said, "Ren." I said, "Mom." She said, "I don't know what to." I said, "It's cold. Come inside." I made coffee. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen and looked around the room like a woman walking through a museum she had not been allowed into as a child. She touched the back of the rocking chair. She touched the edge of the wood stove with her fingertips. She looked at the cookbook on the table. She did not pick it up. I poured the coffee. I handed her a mug. We sat at the table. She held the mug in both hands. She looked at the cabinets. She looked at the floor. She looked at the cookbook. She did not look at me. She said, "I haven't been in this house in 6 years." I know. It looks the same. I haven't changed anything. She would not have liked me being here. She would have. No Ren. Mom, she would have. She set the coffee down. How do you know? I stood up. I went to the laundry room. I came back with the leather notebook. I set it on the table in front of her. "What is this?" she said. It's her notebook. I opened it. I turned to a page I had marked the night before. A page dated April 2019. I slid the notebook across the table. "Read this one, Mom." She put on her reading glasses. She bent her head over the notebook. I watched her face while she read. Her eyes moved across the page slowly. Then they stopped. Then her hand went up to her mouth. The entry was short. Carla called today. She left a message. She said she has been thinking about coming up. She did not say more than that. I did not call her back. I do not know how to call her back. I have not figured out yet how to be a mother to my own grown daughter without sounding like I am still scolding her for a mistake she made when she was 40 years old and afraid. I have to figure it out before I die. That is what I keep telling myself. And then another week goes by, and then another month, and then another year. She was a good daughter. She is a good daughter. She made one bad call from a hospital waiting room. I am the one who made it bigger than it was. My mother put her hand on the page. She started crying. This was different from the phone. This was the kind of crying that comes from a place a woman has been holding shut for 6 years. I sat across from her. I did not get up. I did not go to her. I let her cry. When she lifted her head, she said, "She forgave me." She forgave you. She never told me. She didn't know how. My mother put her hands flat on the table. She looked at me. Her face was wet. She said, "Ren, I'm sorry." I said, "I hear you." She said, "I am so sorry." I said, "I know you are." She said, "Will you forgive me?" I waited. I waited until I knew. Then I said, "Yes, Mom, I forgive you." She put her face in her hands. I got up. I went around the table. I sat down next to her. I put my arm around her shoulders. We sat like that for a long time. After the crying stopped, I took her outside. I showed her the orchard, the chicken coop with Hazel, the woodpile, the lean-to. I took her to the greenhouse. I unlocked the door with the brass key from the box on the laundry room wall. I pushed the door open. I stepped inside first. I turned to her. She was standing in the doorway. She had stopped moving. Her face was pale. She said, "Ren." "Come in, Mum." She came in slowly. She walked between the raised beds. She read the tags. She paused at the Newtown Pippin bed. She paused at the Brandywine bed. She paused at the Long Pie pumpkin bed. When she got to the bed labeled Carla's Beans. Acquired 1987. Grown from a single packet given to me by my daughter in her senior year of high school. She stopped walking. She stood there. She read the tag 3 times. She did not turn around. I came up behind her. I said, "You gave her seeds." She said, "It was a Christmas present." I was 17. They were just seed packets I bought at the hardware store. She kept them, Mom. I forgot I gave them to her. She didn't forget. My mother sat down on the cold concrete floor of the greenhouse. She put her hands over her face. She said, I have been so stupid, Ren. I sat down next to her. I leaned my head against hers. I said, you weren't stupid. You were scared. You did one thing that was wrong, and you did it because you were scared, and you spent 6 years thinking you were a worse person than you were. I said, she would have wanted you to come home. I didn't. It's okay. I should have. It's okay. Ren. Mom. I should have come home. You're home now. We sat on the floor of the greenhouse, among the 60 raised beds, under the wooden rafters, under the grey February light, until our legs went numb. That afternoon I remembered something. The 14th tin. I had not dug it up yet. The map had said, number 14 is for the day you really need it. I had been waiting. I didn't know what I had been waiting for, but sitting at the kitchen table, watching my mother eat soup from one of my grandmother's bowls, I knew. I said, Mom? Yes. Will you come help me dig something? She looked at me. All right. We put on coats. We walked across the back field. The map said 14, south corner of the apple orchard, at the base of the elephant tree, 3 feet east of the trunk. My mother and I took turns with the shovel. She had not used a shovel in a long time. She apologized for being slow. I told her there was no slow. We dug, about a foot down. We hit a small wooden box. I lifted it out of the ground. It was bigger than the others. I brushed the dirt off. I brought it back to the kitchen. I set it on the table. My mother sat down across from me. I cracked the wax with the tip of a paring knife. I opened the box. Inside, no seeds, an envelope, cream-colored, sealed. On the front in my grandmother's handwriting, for Carla, from Mira, October 2019. My mother went absolutely still. She said, that's for me. Yes. She wrote that in 2019. Yes. She never sent it. No. Why? I said, Mom, why don't you open it? She did not open it, not for a long minute. She just looked at the envelope on the table. Then she picked it up with 2 fingers like it might break. She slid a butter knife under the flap. She opened it. Inside, a single sheet of stationery. Cream. Her handwriting on it. The careful slanted cursive I had known my whole life. My mother read it. She read it silently. Her face changed 3 times while she read. She put the letter down on the table. She pushed it across to me. She said, read it. I read it. Carla, I have been writing this letter in my head for 3 years. I am finally putting it on paper because I do not know how much time I have left, and because I do not want to die without you having read these words. I was angry with you for what you did in 2016. I was angry for a long time. I was angry because I thought you had not understood what the farm was. I was angry because I thought if you had understood, you would not have signed anything. I have come to understand that the reason you did not understand what the farm was because I did not tell you. I built the keeping garden in 1986, and I did not tell you. I did not tell you when you were 18. I did not tell you when you were 30. I did not tell you when you were 38. I did not tell you because I did not share things. Your father used to say I was the most private woman he had ever met. He said it like it was a compliment. I am not sure now that it was one. You signed a piece of paper because you thought you were saving the family from a debt you could not see how to fight. You did it because you loved me. You did it because you were scared. I forgave you a long time ago, Carla. The longer I waited to call, the harder the calling got. And then it became a habit. And then it became a wall. And the wall became a thing I was used to looking at, and I forgot that I had built it. I am old. I am sick. I do not have very long. I am sorry. I love you. I have always loved you. I have never not loved you. Please come back to the farm when I am gone. Please walk through the greenhouse. Please find the bed I planted in the spring of 1987 from a packet of seeds you gave me when you were 17 years old. I have grown those beans every year for 35 years. I have never told anyone where they came from. They are yours. They were always yours. They are the only beans in my garden I have never traded. Your mother, Mira, I finished reading. I put the letter down. My mother was crying without sound. She was sitting very straight in her chair. Her hands were folded in her lap. Tears were running down her face and dropping onto her wrists, and she was not moving to wipe them away. I went around the table. I knelt down beside her. I took her hands. I said, Mom. She said, I should have come back Ren. I said, you're back now. She said, it's too late. I said, it isn't. She looked at me. I said, it isn't, Mom, because the beans are still there. She kept them for you for 35 years. They are still there. They are still alive. And you are still alive. And the only thing that's late is the talking. Everything else is on time. She put her arms around me. She held me for a long time. A week later, a black SUV came up the gravel lane. I was on the porch. I had been expecting her. Not Jeffrey Hollis this time. Adelaide Thorne herself. She got out of the car. Tall, 48, long charcoal coat. She walked across the gravel with a kind of stride that said, I have come to settle this. She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. She looked up at me. Miss Caldwell? Mrs. Thorne. Adelaide, please. Mrs. Thorne is fine. A small flicker. She did not climb the steps. I did not invite her up. You've been busy? She said. I have. I read the article. Most people did. It was very well written. Doris Tremaine is a good writer. She studied me. She said, I came to ask you something. All right. I came to ask you in person what your number is. I looked at her. I did not answer right away, because I wanted her to feel the silence. I said, Mrs. Thorne, there isn't a number. There is always a number, Miss Caldwell. Not for me. 500,000. No. 750,000. No. $1 million, Miss Caldwell. Cash. For the collection alone. You keep the farm. No. She tilted her head. For the first time, something in her face moved that was not strategy. It was almost respect. She said, why? I said, because they aren't mine to sell. They are. Legally. Legally, yes. Actually, no. That's a distinction. It's the only distinction that matters. She looked at the porch boards. She looked back at me. She said very quietly, your grandmother said almost exactly that to me. In 2019. In her kitchen. I know. How? She wrote it down. A pause. A long one. Then Adelaide Thorne did something I did not expect. She nodded. She said, all right, Miss Caldwell. All right, what? All right, you win. I'm not trying to win. I know you're not. That's why you have. She turned. She walked back to her car. She paused with her hand on the door. She turned back. She said, take care of them. I said, I will. She got in. She drove away. The black SUV went down the gravel lane. I stood on the porch. I watched until I could not see her anymore. Then I went inside. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired. I felt like a woman who had just done a thing that needed doing and now had to go water the chickens. The Mira Caldwell Heirloom Seed Day happened on the last Saturday of August. I did not call it a festival. I did not call it a fair. I called it a day, because that is what my grandmother would have called it. Otis built the tables. Marlene came back from Minnesota and brought 4 of the other keepers with her. Doris wrote a follow-up piece that ran in the Sunday paper the week before. 250 people came to the farm that Saturday. Maybe more. I lost count after the parking lot filled up and people started parking along the gravel lane all the way back to Route 9. Otis stood at the gate. He had on a wool cap and a clean flannel shirt, and he was directing people through the orchard with the slow, patient hand of a man who had been waiting 31 years to direct people through this orchard. My mother stood at a table near the porch. She had baked. She had baked for 3 days straight pumpkin bread, made from long pie, from the recipe in the cookbook, from the seeds my grandmother had kept since 1992. 90 loaves. She sold every one of them. She sat behind that table in a blue apron, and she handed loaves to people in paper sleeves. And she made change from a tin, and she laughed. I had not seen my mother laugh in 3 years. I watched her from across the yard, and I had to look away. The keepers gathered in the greenhouse. 9 of them. They walked the rows of beds. They read the tags. They touched nothing. One of them, a small woman in her late 80s with white hair pulled into a knot at the back of her head, stood at the bed labeled Quaker Beans, Pennsylvania, P. Hatchet, 1998. She put her hand on the side of the bed. She said to no one in particular, "My friend grew these." I came up beside her. I said, "You're Pearl Hatchet." She looked at me. Her eyes were the lightest blue I had ever seen. She said, "I drove 7 hours." I said, "Thank you for coming." She said, "Your grandmother loved you very much." I said, "I know." She said, "I am saying it anyway." She put her hand on my arm, the way an old woman puts her hand on a young woman's arm when she wants to leave something behind without saying what she is leaving. She said she is smiling somewhere. I said, "I hope so." She said, "I know so." She walked away. She walked down the row of beds, slowly, one hand trailing along the wooden frames. I stood in the doorway of the greenhouse for a long time. My mother stayed through October. She slept in my grandmother's old bedroom. She found the quilt Mira had made in 1986, and she slept under it every night. I would hear her sometimes in the early hours, moving around in the kitchen, putting on the kettle. We did not talk about everything. We did not need to. We had begun. The first frost came on the 8th of October. I knew it was coming. The barometer had been falling all week. The hens were puffed up. The old goats had been crowded into the corner of the barn since Thursday morning. I covered the late beds in the small greenhouses with floating row cover. I brought in the last of the tomatoes. I picked the squash that was ready. I covered the herb bed with straw. That night, I lit a fire in the wood stove, and I sat at the kitchen table. Pepper was in my grandmother's rocking chair. The wind was picking up. The leather notebook was open in front of me. I had been writing in it on and off for 6 months. Not every day, not on a schedule, just when something happened that felt like it belonged to the future. I picked up the pencil. I turned to a fresh page. I wrote October 8th. Grandma, the first frost came tonight. I covered the late beds. I think I did it right. Otis came by and looked, and didn't say anything was wrong, which from him means I did it right. Mom has been here since March. She is going home next week. She does not want to. I do not want her to. But she has a small life in New Hampshire. She needs to close down properly before she comes back. And she will come back in the spring. Pearl Hatchet wrote me a letter. She said she has more seeds. She would like to send them to me. I told her yes. Marlene's foundation has the backup propagation going in Iowa. She said the brandywines look beautiful. Adelaide Thorne came to the porch. She asked me my number. I told her there wasn't one. She nodded. She left. I think she meant it. The bank is paid. The roof is patched. The fence on the south side will be done by Thanksgiving. The chickens are all named. The cat is Pepper. The goats are old. The orchard is still here. I am not going back to college. I have decided. I am staying. I am 20 years old and I am a keeper grandma. I do not yet have a daughter or a granddaughter or anyone to whom I am building this for. That part comes when it comes. But I am here, and I will not sell. I promise. I love you. Ren. I closed the notebook. I put the pencil down. I sat at the table. The wood stove popped. The wind moved against the kitchen windows. Pepper opened one eye, closed it again. In the next room I could hear my mother humming. Something low, something old. A song I half remembered from when I was 6. She was washing the dishes. She was not going to bed yet. She was going to come sit at this table with me in a few minutes, and we were going to play cards the way she and her own mother had played cards in this same kitchen 40 years ago, and we would not say anything important. And that would be the most important thing we said all night. I put another log in the stove. I waited for her. The kitchen was warm. The kitchen was full. The kitchen was finally full again. If you have inherited something, a piece of land, a recipe, a box of letters in an attic, and someone has told you it isn't worth keeping, remember this. The things worth keeping are almost never the things the market knows how to price. A pumpkin seed, a note in lemon juice, a grandmother's coat, a letter she never sent. There is a woman in your life somewhere who is keeping something she has never told you about. Share this with her. Or write her a letter. Or open the box in the attic you have been meaning to open for 10 years. If you have a story of your own, leave it in the comments below. I would like to read it.